start?
On the, yes.
Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Thought me and Chelsea might be late, but we were the very first agenda item after they approved the minutes. So, yeah, so we got out of there. Okay.
It's a sign of a healthy relationship, I think. They let
Yes.
us up.
They like it.
They
Yeah.
used to let us sit there. All right, we're gonna call the meeting to order. Agenda item number 2 is update regarding the 88th legislative session. All yours, Tony.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I tried to pare this down a little bit, but there are a number of bills I do want to make sure we talk about, so bear with me. The first thing I want to do, though, is address our housekeeping bill, which has a list of a lot of our legislative priorities. That has not been filed yet. We're still working on some of the language. We're hoping to see it in the next couple of weeks. We'll let everybody know as soon as it's filed and is officially filed with that. But that's where we are right now. The first group of bills I want to talk about are, I apologize, I'm out of order here, are, according to this slide, salary implications. So there are 3 bills up there dealing with salary implications. And the reason these are up here, a lot of times as an SCSI agency, you think, well, do these deal with appropriations? Do they impact us? The first one is a longevity pay for state employees. That would impact us. And right now, every state employee gets $20 for every, is it 2 years of service or not?
Yes,
Every 2 years of service, they get $20 added to their salary. This would bump that up to 50, and that would impact the baseline of what we pay for salaries. And the reason it's important is because as not being part of the appropriations process, we would need to be able to fund that through either current money or through fees of some sort. The next bill is HB 202 by Busey, which would raise the pay for state employees $10,000 per year for a biennium. This is an odd bill in the sense that it's not directly amending any specific statute, so we're not really sure exactly how it would work, but we are watching it just to make sure, see what happens, because obviously we don't know if that's tied to appropriated agencies or not. And then the third one, which is a resolution, which means it would be a constitutional amendment, would raise the contribution to the employees' retirement system that the state agencies contribute from 5 to 7% or 6 to 7%, which would also be something we would have to figure out how to compensate for should that one pass, because
From 5 to 8.
From 6 to 7%. I'm sorry. Okay. So the next set of bills are enforcement bills, enforcement-related bills, and the first one is HB 1947. Which deals with de novo interpretation of state agency rules. This bill states that an action brought by or against the state agency, the reviewing court or SOA, whichever is applicable, would review the provision of the state law, including the rules de novo or without reference to the agency's interpretation. And in the case of any ambiguity, this bill would require that reviewing entity, the court or SOA, to resolve the matter to limit the state's authority with that regard. So it's a little bit of a shift on how they review things. And then the next bill, which is SB 734 by Hinojosa. The reason this is on here under enforcement is this is actually, most of this bill deals with reporting requirements. It requires an agency to provide notices on applications and forms and on an agency's website that a criminal conviction may disqualify an applicant for a license, list the factors that are used in determination. It also requires the agency to report on an annual basis the number of applications received, approved, denied for any reason. But the reason it's here under enforcement is it also affects the process by which an agency determines what criminal offenses relate to the duties of a license. It adds additional situations or criminal offenses that could be considered by an agency and modifies the analysis of the various factors that must be considered. It also, currently the burden is on, if an application is denied, the burden is on the applicant to prove that they're eligible. This would shift that burden to the agency to prove that we would have to prove that they're ineligible. So.
That's substantial. How does enforcement feel about that?
The approach that we take in general, we have to show the factors that they already have to take into consideration, like how old they were when the criminal offense happened, like what they've done since those factors are still in there, where it's just like overtly we're saying, we took those into account. We already say that we do, as part of our, how we, display the case in front of the SOA judge. So I don't think it's gonna change how we handle it very much. And they still will have that burden, the license holder, or the applicant will still have a bit of a burden, because they'll still have to meet our standard, the honesty, trustworthiness, and integrity, which is in our statute, so.
So it seems like more than anything, this is one to kind of watch and see like where it's coming from, what the political implications are, just kind of how it lands.
That came out in Sunset too.
Yeah.
Years ago.
I think just codifying it in a way, especially for the level of burden of proof, it's just codifying, like, we've always had the preponderance in general, so that doesn't change. And the reporting stuff that Tony mentioned, we kind of keep track of that, but we don't necessarily report it in regards to the number of denials, so.
And what the bill requires is that you report to the legislature and you post it on the website annually. I think the 15th of January is the deadline, by the 15th of January.
Yeah, in 2024.
Yeah, 24, it's not, yeah, obviously.
Or no,
25. I believe.
25.
25 is the first.
Oh, good.
And one year, you have to report,
Right.
so we'd have to start tracking it starting in January.
Tony, is this an effort to kind of give a second chance to, convicted felons or whatever?
I
to
believe
get back into
so. I mean, there's a tendency to do that over there in terms of giving people second chances. And the person who filed this is usually somebody who's on the forefront of trying to do that. So Senator Hinojosa. So I think you're right about that. Any other questions?
But what's interesting is that there seems to be sort of alignment on that front at the Capitol, like, on both sides.
I think even when we went to Sunset, they kind of said that as well, right? There's also like military people, and so that seems to be the spirit of this administration for the past several years to,
Yes, sir.
hey, give them a second chance, right? But, when you have 5 felony convictions at one time, it's kind of hard.
But there's also an agency out there that just has a say no policy. They probably don't have a vetting process, and that's probably where they're trying to get.
I think that's part of the reporting. They want to see what other agencies are doing and compare, apples to oranges, and so to speak.
And see if there's any.
There's a
need for
companion bill to
consistency.
this too, right?
Is
There's a House bill, I think.
Okay.
So there's, and I think, there's some consensus on.
Well, if you deny 100 and you accept 4, and every other state agency is 60-40 or 40-60, you're gonna see that one agency has some issues.
Right. Yeah, that part is just to provide transparency on how agencies are handling these things, and maybe future legislation to provide consistency on how that goes. Okay, the next set of bills are bills impacting governor appointees, so that's why they're on here, because they're of obvious interest to you. The first one prohibits a governor appointee from making a political contribution to the governor or a PAC set up to support the governor of more than $2,500 in any year in which that person serves, and also makes an individual ineligible to serve as an appointee for any contributions over that in a year preceding their appointment. So that's been filed, I think, a couple of sessions, and hasn't really gone anywhere, but obviously we'll watch it because it impacts all of you. And then the same thing for the next bill was filed last session, and it just states that the financial statements filed by public officials and candidates are made available on the Texas Ethics Commission website no later than 15 days after the statement is required to be filed or is filed.
So we still have to file.
What are the dates on that? Do we have to have it done?
April 15th.
I don't know, I can look that up.
And then we can extend it to June 30th, is that right?
You should be getting something in the mail about that, or email soon, because they
Get out of it.
have just, right. If you are serving on January 1, you have to report.
Yeah, y'all told us.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Thanks for CPA, so.
So I apologize for the confusion earlier. This was supposed to be the first slide. So this is there's a group of bills dealing with the seller's disclosure. We actually had 2 filed yesterday that I'll mention as well that aren't on here. So the first bill, HB 697 by Holland, that's been filed previously. Essentially, it requires a seller to disclose the type of gas piping or plumbing in a home. And the reason why that's of interest this year, maybe more so than other years, is that inspectors are now required to call it out via the new revised SOPs. So there's an impact, like sellers will know likely if they have it, if the house has been inspected by an inspector, and they call.
So down to the nitty gritty that real estate people have to deal with, is it gonna be in the seller's disclosure?
Yes, ma'am.
Or will we get to change that?
Well, we'll have to, so they're changing the statutory seller's disclosure to include a checkbox for the types of plumbing, gas plumbing. So, yeah, the agency will have to amend.
But if the seller doesn't know, it's like lead-based paint.
Yes, ma'am.
If the seller doesn't know, then they don't check it,
Correct.
then the inspection shows it, so then you have to revise the seller's disclosure.
Likely, and this is essentially a compromise regarding corrugated stainless steel tubing to let people know if it's in the house or not. So it doesn't call it out specifically, but it calls out if you do know the type of plumbing, you're supposed to disclose it. And there was a companion to that bill, SB 864 was filed yesterday, so there's now a Senate companion to it as well. And the next one is HB 1256, also by Holland, and that requires a seller to disclose if the property is located in a special district like a MUD. I believe we've seen that one previously as well. And then the next one is HB 1257, also by Holland, which essentially requires the seller of a newly constructed residential property located in a special district to provide a specific written notice regarding the tax assessments to the buyer. That doesn't amend the seller's disclosure, but it likely would require TREC to promulgate some sort of notice, either a separate notice or maybe change the contract in some way. So we're watching that one as well. And then another bill that was filed yesterday that we haven't really done a deep dive on, so I apologize for not knowing all the specifics of it, but it is HB 2260, and it is related to a seller's disclosure for property located in a floodplain. And what it says is that if a property is recorded or is in a 100-year floodplain, but the property doesn't currently have a residence on it or one under construction, you need to provide a notice that it's in that floodplain. And if it's a yes and the notice isn't provided, it allows the purchaser up to 5 years to take action on the seller. So there's a flood. So anyway, we'll watch that. And what I just said may change slightly once we do a deeper dive into what that language actually means. So just giving you a heads up on that. All right, so the next one is buyer's disclosure for foreign entities. There's been several bills filed that prohibit certain foreign entities from purchasing property or limit what they do. The reason this particular bill is of interest to the agency is it requires TREC to promulgate a notice. And what that notice would say is that the person is a foreign entity who's buying the property, and it authorizes the seller to revoke the promise to sell the property. They get the notice, they notice it's a foreign entity, they can say they can back out of it. And it also states that the person who was going to purchase the property cannot take action against the seller for doing that. So see that. But yeah, this one's of special interest mainly because of, well, obviously it's of interest to all of you, but interest to the agency because it would require us to develop a notice.
How would the seller find that out?
The notice would have to be provided for.
The notice would be signed by the buyer.
Yes,
that I am a foreign person.
yes.
It's interesting because you can buy property in the name of an LLC, and I don't think they have those provisions for it.
But if,
Or a
But,
partnership or.
but this does not say foreign persons, this says foreign actors. The foreign person statute, you can be here 6 months out of the last 18 months and be paid with a W-2, and you don't qualify as a foreign person, according to IRS code. Because we sell a lot of property to Mexican nationals, Canadian nationals, and very few are actually classified as foreign persons according to the IRS statute. This says foreign actors, so I think it would be any foreign national, from that named country, would it not be?
We don't know what the definition
Yeah,
of
anyway,
that
Well,
is.
there is a
Okay.
definition, and there is a definition, and I can find it and get it, I'll report back to you guys, I don't have it on this.
So the listing agreement now
Oh,
says
you have it?
foreign nationals,
Okay.
paragraph
We're not-
20,
yeah.
20 of the contract.
You just read it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just go ahead and read it.
But that's.
So this is the definition.
It says prohibited foreign actor means an alien, business, government, or an agent, trustee, or fiduciary of an alien business or government from a country identified as a country that poses a risk to the national security of the United States.
That is different than the foreign person we're used to talking about.
Also,
Yeah, but
there's
foreign, that's what I'm saying, it's gonna get sticky real quick because I can set up an LLC with 3 partners and one of them is 5% owner, right? And he's Chinese.
I know there's a big push against this. I think one of the main things is somebody just bought a whole bunch of, like 10,000 acres next to an air base in Laredo. Somebody did up in Montana somewhere, and that's what's drawing people's attention, but
Yeah.
this gets into the fair housing people, I'm sorry, but.
That's gonna be hard.
Well, and then the aspect of it that holds the seller harmless as well, I think there's some issues around that as
Yeah.
well, so. Okay, the next bill is the real estate inspector bill, this is HB 1363. This was one of our legislative initiatives, it repeals the recovery fund. The House bill by Representative Kemple has been filed, we're still waiting to see the Senate version of that. We have a Senate sponsor, Senator Zaffarini has agreed to carry that bill, so once that's filed, we'll have a House and a Senate companion for that bill, and we'll hopefully it'll move through the process and we'll be able to get something done on that one. If you recall, that's since the recovery fund isn't utilized, and as Renata mentioned yesterday, we're routinely putting money into GR because it's not, this would repeal it, and then there's a process by which that money would be phased out. A part of it is credited to the license holders, and then the majority of it is sent to GR, so. Okay, and then the last set of bills here deal with licensing, and there's HB 391, which repeals the franchise tax. We've talked about that briefly a bit, at least in the budget, I think in the budget here. But that one repeals the franchise tax, and the reason that's important is that the franchise tax account status page is what licensing and education use. Licensing uses it for business entities to prove that they're able to do business in the state of Texas. And Gen Shop does that same thing for providers. So if this were to go away, we would have to figure out how to prove that. Yes, sir.
So, of course, that's got other implications, which, could be nice, maybe. But do we have any idea yet what kind of traction that thing's getting?
No, sir.
Probably not. I will say this.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, I will say this, that the privilege to do business in Texas, i.e. your franchise tax good standing is based on paying your franchise tax.
Right.
Should that go away, what would be the basis for them revoking that privilege for non-payment of taxes? So everything kind of comes off the table. So effectively, potentially could go away, right? That requirement to verify whether, a corporation or a LLC or a partnership would have their privilege to do business in Texas still in place.
Yes, sir. And then the final bill, SB 422 by Senator Paxton, if all of you are, I believe, aware that there's currently the ability for military spouses to do business without having a license, if they're licensed in a jurisdiction that has substantially equivalent requirements to Texas. This bill essentially allows the active military service members to also take advantage of that, yes.
Who are certified.
Yes. So right now it
Not
only
by
applies,
extension.
so right now it only applies to military spouses. This would allow the actual active military service member to do it as well. So these bills typically pass, we'll obviously watch it and update you, but the military related vet and licensing bills dealing with vets and spouses and active military members typically pass. Obviously, the big question here is what is substantially similar to what Texas requirements are, and that's something we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, but, and that is all the bills I want to talk about. I just briefly, wanted to mention that we're currently monitoring 171 bills. Just over 100 of them are what we call priority one bills, which have some direct impact on the agency. The reason why we're not going through all of them is because the vast majority of those impact all occupational agencies, and they're HR related, they're new holidays or repeal of holidays, they're contracting bills that really are kind of nitty gritty in terms of staffing and things of that nature that we need to know about in terms of the operation of the agency. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those or talk about any of this with you, but these are ones that have more policy implications for all.
So you will receive regularly our written bill updates. You received one of those on Friday. And that's kind of a living document that just keeps changing based on what's been added, right? So let us know if you have any questions about a bill or just interested in one. Just reach out to Tony and Summer on that. They're eating, living, and breathing it right now.
When's the deadline? Oh,
March 10th.
March 10th.
March 10th, and there's often bills, there's always bills filed after that, but they don't have quite the same traction, obviously.
Or tacked on.
Yeah, but, so as I mentioned in my email, we do have house committees, and, so we'll start seeing these bills moving through the process right now. Right now, it seems like they're focused on the finance bill, the appropriations bill, so, but, I haven't seen any other, committee meetings being scheduled, but they will likely be scheduled soon. And we'll keep all of you updated on this in terms of any bills that we're following that go through that process.
There was a bill last year about transferring $700,000 to the general fund. What was that? Last year there
It's
was.
a ransom is what we call it in Plano, which is,
For STS.
yes, because we are SCSI, we basically just pay an amount for the privilege of being SCSI.
Right.
And there was a bill that was filed that eliminated that. It just got caught up in the process and didn't pass.
There was another one, other than that one.
Oh,
Was it the inspector bill, the recovery fund bill? Because that money also, the vast majority of that gets credited to GR, but it goes against the current, it's credited towards what we pay on an annual basis anyway, so it offsets that, is what the way the bill is currently constructed. So I don't,
I'll look at my notes from last year.
okay.
Has the LLC for compensation bill been filed?
We think that's gonna be part of, the housekeeping bill, we just haven't seen anything yet, so,
we've seen a draft.
right.
It just hadn't been filed yet. I bet right after this winter meeting.
Right.
I bet they were looking for a little bit of feedback.
And that really won't, I mean, in the big sense of things, when I'm paying Barbara the LLC, I mean, her LLC doesn't be registered or whatever with you, with TREC. It just gives me the ability to pay it. Whereas our LLC is not licensed.
No, it carves out those business entities that do that, specifically that, they can't do any other type of brokerage activities from being licensed. So any other business entity would be required to be licensed, but those set up specifically for what you're talking about would be.
It would be up to the broker to, yeah.
And you don't have to have a.
With a registration.
That's right.
Yeah.
They would be registered with us.
Right.
Thank you for reminding me that.
So there's a
there is a
registration.
registration.
So that will
with us.
change that process.
Yes.
That was,
Well, I mean, it will and it won't, right? You still already have to do something if you want to receive compensation through that. It'll just be a registration versus
But
a.
if I register it, the only person that can register it is the designated broker. And I've got to attest that it's in good standing.
But we
I
haven't
don't think
really,
we've
we
shaped.
haven't really
yeah.
thought
Yeah,
about
it
what
just-
that's gonna
It would be a different, yeah, I don't think we've come up with the
Okay, so
process for that.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
I think the intent is that particular type of entity registering it, or the process to get them with us would be significantly less burdensome than it is right now, so that's what we have to think about.
Tony,
Yes, sir.
anything on marijuana bills that would affect enforcement? I mean,
Yeah, there actually is a bill that,
on the
this,
legalization or,
well, it
Loosening.
moves, was it, 1 ounce or less to a class C misdemeanor?
There's multiple bills, there's some that decriminalize it. in general, and then there's some that move it from a class A to a class C.
Right, so there is some movement there that would
In
impact.
general, marijuana or drug possession, like misdemeanor,
Mhm.
are not directly related to the profession under our rules. But if you have multiple, convictions of that, then it can impact.
Even if it's a
review.
misdemeanor?
They also,
Even if it's a misdemeanor?
yes.
Okay.
That's initially when you're disclosing, you need to disclose all your criminal offenses, and then we weed it out from there. If you have like.
Yeah, good one.
Oh, yeah, no
Wow.
I didn't have offense in that.
Ron, you shouldn't take credit for it, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
If someone has 3, possession things.
Yeah.
Could impact something, we wouldn't deny something like that, but now that they've decriminalized it, and there's its function in those things that allow people to expunge those things easier.
Right.
See where they go on those. But yeah, there's, I think it's like 5 bills, they're written differently, but they all have the same intent.
And again, I just want to reiterate what Executive Director said. Any questions, any bills that you don't see on the report that you're curious about, if you have any questions about, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Summer. We're happy to, if we don't know the answer, find it for you and get it to you as soon as possible.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right,
Okay, commission initiatives, I'm gonna start us on this and then, depending on how much, discussion you wanna have, others are kind of surrounding that have, a lot of information around specific initiatives. I'll tell you that, in November of 2021, y'all remember having in your workshop a kind of a brainstorming session for initiatives. And this was intended to be, to inform staff of how we should essentially spend our time. What initiatives are important to you and how can we support your work for calendar year 2022. So this update is intended to tell you where we are in those initiatives. I also wanted to throw out there that I think this is, doing this, the brainstorming in November of 21 was the first time we've done that in this way. And I think that we will continue that rhythm as long as it's something that you appreciate, at the November of odd years workshop. Because what that essentially means is that we can spend the years that are not legislative sessions with a heavier initiative left, if you will.
Is it helpful for you to always say?
It is, and it doesn't mean that we can't take something else up with your direction. But I think it's helpful for us to know what you'd like from us and how you'd like for us to spend our time. So it's been helpful for us. It's been a lot of work, I would say, but good work. And it's one mechanism that we can, advisory committees recommend rule changes and those come to you, but some of these are kind of a little bit larger than a simple change like that, and so being able to examine those things is helpful. So I think that's what we'll stick to in terms of a rhythm. We'll have a legislative year where the initiatives are essentially implement the will of the session, then brainstorm for the following year to be commission initiatives, and then go on like that. Welcome your feedback on that process. So the first initiative that we have are addressing is this concept of identifying a complaint resolution option for complaints that are minor or easy to remedy. We really have struggled with this one. Initially, we got staff together and looked at a process for handling kind of these shallow or simple complaints, and then came back to, I think, the executive committee, I think is where we went, and said, we think this needs to be put on hold until the new database. And as the procurement for the database went on, and it seemed like this was gonna take longer than we wanted it to, at the encouragement of the chair, we just looked at it again. And so we have identified one way in which we can start this process. I don't think it's the completion of it, but I think it will be helpful in terms of getting us down the road. So we have examined a process to implement a conditional dismissal process. That basically what we're wanting to do is modify our complaint form and add a box that says, is this an advertising complaint? So using kind of the only identifying advertising complaints as the simple, or what we can do through this process. And so we'll look at that advertising complaint and see if it is one that we can, what we're calling triage. If it can be addressed with a letter saying, you are in violation, please fix it within so many days, and show us proof of that fix, then we will dismiss it. We are wanting to start this in mid-March, just see how it goes, and kind of report back on the process. Have I said anything wrong, Mike?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so I think advertising is the big one. I think there are probably some others that might bubble up that I think we could capture in our new database where we can kind of triage this better. But I think advertising will kind of get us a pretty good bang for our buck on this one. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a crossover between complaints that go to TREC and I guess have you all talked to any of the MLS organizations? Because they kick back some problems with advertising. I know HAR probably does, Metrotex does, and so it's Netris, it's all of the North Texas MLSs.
How do they do that?
It's some kind of, something that pops up, I don't know.
They have some sort of software that looks for,
Words.
right, keywords.
Keywords, key phrases. Like I sold a farm with mature pecan trees. The mature popped up.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
like a fair housing.
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, right, that's,
That may not help with the teams and that sort of thing, though. I don't remember if we've gotten any of those kind of complaints.
HAR's having a hard time, and we've talked about this, linking to our database and getting the data they need on a concise feed, like if licensees change or whatever, they're having a hard time getting that data, pulling the data, which is the recent changes. They have to pull everything, and they can't filter.
Interesting.
So
But yeah,
I know Steve Rapp has gone back and forth in the past with that.
Yes, and that's part of our, what do we call it, our high volume.
It's the high value
Yeah.
sets, and I'm not sure if the thought is that, because I know there's also a question of like where they're housed. And so I'm remembering conversations with him that like the new database should be able to help with that, and they're gonna start housing them on like a DIR master server where somebody like HAR could just go get it.
Right.
So I think all of that is, I mean, it's the process, right? We keep talking about it's a database, but I think those are considerations that were built in.
Yeah, I think that, they just need a feed, like a regular.
Like one that's not everything overnight, it's what changed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think they're having problems too with DBAs and whatever, because it'll say one thing on one side and something else on another side. And it'll list designated supervisor on HAR and it's not on TREC, and
Interesting, okay. One thing I do remember is when we developed our scope of work for this database, we met with local boards as one of our stakeholder groups to just say, what do you need from us? And this topic came up. And so those, I'm really terrible at conveying what one group needs from another, but we got those groups together, our IT guys and the local board. So I feel pretty confident that we should be doing better at that.
HAR is moving from their old legacy membership system, Rapatoni or whatever, to what Salesforce there. So maybe will be a point where, they're both on systems that are older today and come together, get data and talk to one another, so.
I didn't know Rapatoni was still operational.
Are you saying rapid toning?
No, it's two Ps in the middle,
Rapid.
Rapatoni.
Okay,
That it's been around
Like,
since.
we have a new
dirt.
title for toning.
Yeah.
Since dirt.
But you know what's interesting is, we have brokers and they pull licenses, every inactive license by county. They can pull any license expiring by county. They can pull anytime someone's applied for a test.
Wow.
And I mean, Leslie sent me one that had 6 license numbers on it, and I think only 2 of the 6 were correct. But I mean, we need the database, but I think the association still, when you turn an application, they need to verify that, because once that number goes in under your MLS ID, it populates everything. So, I mean, sure, we need to make it easier to find, but I know our board, they confirm all the license number before they give you your nerds. You know, so
What do they use on the membership system?
I can't even remember what it's called, but they just changed.
Yeah, so I think a lot of them are updating their membership systems, which should make it easier for them to go.
Does the TREC license and the Association of Realtors license number and your Navica ID number, do they all correspond or
No.
are they different?
No, you have your TREC number, then you have your business entity number, then you have your MLS number, then you have your NERDS number.
Do
And
you
Lord
have
help
them
you
all
might even have
memorized?
a HAR number. Yeah. Yeah, none of them.
If you use, like if I were still active in NAR, I would know my NERDS number in my head. I know the TREC number because I have to put it on for CP. It's only time.
7995.
I know my bar number.
Oh gosh, you do?
I have a quick question about this too.
And I know the corporate number. 'cause
I want
that's-
everyone to hear your question. Okay, Commissioner Lerner has a question.
I have a quick question about this. So if we give them the time to correct it and they've corrected it, what is the look back? Is there, if they do it again, what happens? Is there a file to be kept if they correct it the first time and then go back to what they were doing after you checked it?
We've talked about this, and I'd love for Mike to weigh in. I think this is something that we may need to kind of continue to watch as the process unfolds. We will clearly keep that information. And, you know, we talked, if they receive 10 of them, then should it be elevated? I don't feel good about there being a number, because I think it depends. Are we talking about a large brokerage? Are we talking about, you know, just what are the facts?
Right.
So I think we need to watch it and see how this unfolds, because this essentially is kind of a new starting point. When discipline of any sort is issued, it ratchets up if there's more of it. It's not perfectly systematic because it depends on the facts. Have I?
No, that's
Messing
correct. I mean, we'll just see how it goes. We'll have to make tweaks in the current database, at least for me, separate these separate so I can track them independently as itself, because
Because there's no room for
there's
it in
no
our
room for
current.
it in our current, it's just going and, you know,
But it won't
the
disappear.
detail more.
No,
So
and
what-
some people
No.
will watch.
Well,
So
if someone gets more, we always check, see how many they get, and in my experience, at least for many, at least sales agents, you warn them once, you're not gonna see them again.
Right.
I think it's gonna be the larger brokerages that have issues, that will be something that will have, I think will pop up sooner with a big brokerage before a sales agent.
Or a bad actor, right?
And
Yeah.
so what I'm kind of referring to, I mean, yes, it is the broker's ultimate responsibility, but so you'll probably notify the sales agent that's doing whatever they're doing, which could add up faster than like, or different look than if it's one person versus the brokerage.
But the brokerage knows
They
they're
have,
notified always. And
This would be like a
No, I know
complaint,
that,
so-
but she's just saying, it just depends if it's a large brokerage or a small brokerage, but many times it's an individual that works for a brokerage, but if that individual continues to do it.
and that seems to be, so I think what this will show, or what this is intended to address is people who make mistakes who need simple correction, right? So not the bad actors. So if you see that individual with a bunch of repeats, then that's not appropriate for the triage system. That's a different kind of discipline. And so I think we'll have to see kind of what those rhythms are and what that looks like, but I think we'll
So
have to
there'll be a-
keep our intention
Perfect. Then-
Yes.
Okay, so as long
We
as they're in the file.
educate the people to, hopefully, we don't see them again, because, there's confusion, even though the rule's been around for, a long time. Because I think they hear one thing from another person, and they just.
Right.
In terms of advertising, what,
Yes.
what's a violation, what's
Mhm.
not.
And that would be good for where videos come in, and you could also have a link to that video. And I think there's one out there.
Yeah.
This is how your advertising should look.
Absolutely. So, next up, beyond, this implementation by mid-March will be, you'll hear this a lot today, a new database. And then we'll be able to really go crazy with this. This is gonna be like a unicorn database, don't we? Ready to move on to the next one? Next one is to examine the practice of wholesaling in Texas. Y'all are familiar with what we've done on this one. Current law, of course, doesn't require a wholesaler to have a license. It does require disclosure, a wholesaler must disclose to a buyer of what they're up to, what they're selling essentially, but they don't have to disclose to the seller. So through this initiative, we issued 2 surveys, got incredible feedback based on those surveys. The first one was to wholesalers, buyers, sellers, and license holders. Had a great response on that. Then did a second survey for the title industry. Got very instructive information there. The results of which we used to just coordinate with Texas Realtors and kind of see what the logical next step was. And it seemed fairly obvious that there was some predatory nature of this, but not so much that we would jump to requiring a license for all wholesalers. A few states that have done that, but no state has done that recently. There were a few right out of the gate that did it, and then it seemed to be a little complicated for them. Arizona recently passed a law that would require disclosure to the seller, and that's what we're looking at doing, and that should be included in our housekeeping bill that is forthcoming.
How are you gonna police it?
Well, and I cannot remember where we ended up on it in terms of, does a seller have an out if it's not disclosed?
No. And so there's 2 places that the current version of that housekeeping bill has this language in. So one is in the property code. There isn't currently any remedy, but it basically requires this wholesaler to make now both a disclosure to the buyer and to the seller before they enter into that contract to sell their interest. But there isn't like a particular termination right or anything, at least in the version we've seen right now. In our statute, it would add that requirement to disclose to the seller, but it's again not a termination right, it would be more like an enforcement action, because if they fail to disclose, then it's considered unlicensed brokerage activity. So then we could take action against them for that particular activity. It's possible that those routes may change as it kind of moves through the process, but that's what the current version looks like right now.
So does the definition of a wholesaler include somebody that is in real estate, that doesn't have a license, and perhaps has 4 or 5 houses that he bought and he's fixing to flip?
No.
No.
That's a flipper.
A wholesaler will enter into a contract with you
Is it like a double close thing?
and have equitable title on market it. We had a 30-minute discussion on this last night about, some people think you should have to disclose before execution. I totally agree. Because once you execute, thanks to Abby Lee, you can assign that no matter what. But the seller can't deny that. But there's still a push for the seller to have some type of termination, which totally, to me, it was very simple. I am buying this with the intent of reselling. I am gonna sell an equitable title. And I'm not worried about if there's a realtor involved, because that realtor should make sure you're getting fair market value. It's those people that don't have representation, that they offer you tax value and it's 100,000 below what it should be. But
it's like an estate property.
yeah, we had a bunch of discussion last night. Some people, well, it can be after execution. I think it has to be before, but if you because I think if I have a property and I go to sell it, I'm not an attorney, but I'll play one. I don't think you can get me for unauthorized real estate, because I have an equitable title. And I could, yeah, so they're gonna do something, I just don't know how it's gonna, I thought it was pretty simple till we had that discussion last night and it kinda confused me.
You're entitled,
Yours is much better.
you're entitled to sell.
Right, but I'm also entitled to sell, if I have a contract, I have equitable title. I theoretically have more rights over that property than you do,
So,
then I can sell it
It's,
without ever closing.
I got a problem when my agents are working for this big hotshot rich person, and they're just they're giving names, they list a house, and it's under contract, and they're selling it to 16 other people or marketing it, and then that guy doesn't want to pay a commission. And we've had that happen, and then, so who owes the commission?
Well, the seller's rights are coming up because of that exotic ranch or whatever that was sold in Fredericksburg, where they ended up selling it for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars more than they paid for it, and the seller got his feelings hurt, which I would, but he wasn't represented either. Yeah,
But it's
they're
not-
gonna do something.
Yeah, and it's waiting for a lawsuit to happen, that's what we're doing, the way I look at it. And I don't wanna be in that lawsuit, thank you.
I have a good question.
Should I or you're right.
good there?
They're renters that don't know what they're doing.
Okay, the next one, increase education and minimum services. So when representing a principal, license holders are required by law to provide certain minimum services, including informing their principal if they receive material information, answering questions, presenting offers. So the broker responsibility course, of course, has been updated and is now being taught as of January 1st to teach both minimum standards, but then also share best practices. So the agency's communications through our speaking engagements with local boards and others is also focused on this issue. It's been a little bit of a drumbeat. Our education initiatives, just to highlight this, are ongoing and will continue. But we welcome any feedback from y'all on if additional steps need to be taken. We kind of keep this drumbeat up. I think it'll be interesting to see if anything from the current broker responsibility course is, as that teaching goes on, if people are better equipped. I feel like that's a little bit of a Pollyanna statement.
Well, but I think it's true though, too. I mean, if you take the course, and granted, we now have some people go through it, but I mean, still, to just, I mean, there's no way you can't, I don't think, have a little deeper understanding what your responsibilities are. Now,
Do you ignore it or not?
right, I mean, you're still, because it comes up a lot, people will say things like, when you take broker responsibility? Well, yeah, but where were you when, I mean, so a lot of them sleep through it, I guess, but, the point is, I think it's good information.
Yeah.
And I think it fixes all the problems.
You learn it through
They
enforcement.
ignore it, Mark.
Well, I'm just saying, but, at the end of the day, you can, all you can do is put it out there, can't, until they have a problem, then through enforcement, people with their hands slapped, and they probably don't do it again. So, complete ignorance, whatever they say, but, I don't know what else you do with that.
ESAC's proposal with the brokerage class, would that not go into the same, do we have somewhere else? I think it goes,
It does.
I think it falls there as well.
yeah. Because I think I love the idea. Have I ever told you I won't finance a lemonade and let's put it to tell you that?
Heard that one.
But is that in statute?
We could have 6 of these 7,
Mhm.
and the other one has to be for a renewal in the statute.
Well, and ESAC is also opening up principles 1 and 2, where we may be able to find areas to reinforce this as well.
That's good.
I feel like this is one place where there's not gonna be a silver bullet, but our like incremental kind of identification of where else we can say it, will be helpful.
I think
And we won't check this off our list.
either before or after the 30 hours on the SAE, if we get any bad comments on that, I would be surprised.
Okay.
I really would.
Well,
What do you think, Vanessa?
No, I agree. And I mean, I think you raised a good point of, is SAE too late, on brokerage? You're gonna.
That's like going to the marriage counsel, you know, you already got a bad broker and you take this and, yeah, but I mean, I'd like it before, but just getting it there.
But getting
as
it
a
there, I
requirement.
think that's right, and I think,
Salesperson's apprentice education. You take 6 classes, then you have to take principles 1, principles 2, agency, law of contracts, promulgated contracts, and financing. Then once you get your license, you have to take 90 hours of approved SAE. And a lot of people will take the classes over, or you take GRI, or this will be a 30-hour class you can take to renew. You do that, legal and legal 2 in your first 2 years. So
Do you have the equivalent of what we call ethics, which you're required to review the regulations of what you can do and cannot do?
that's part of principles 1, chapter 7,
But it's not a
it's also a
separate.
big chunk
and
of
then
legal
part of
too.
legal 1, legal 2. Yeah.
It used to be called ethics.
Yeah, it used to be called ethics, but we changed it to legal and legal 2.
It's still the ethics. You guys are ethics.
Define it.
It's all
I
relative.
will say this,
I'd like that added to this slide.
the
And
more
should we
recent,
have that as a note?
Yeah.
the more recently licensed someone is, the more likely it is they have an appreciation for this stuff.
Correct.
You know, you get out
Yeah,
to
you're
people
right.
that have been at it 20 years, 25, 30 years, whatever, you know, some of my 40 years, you know, they are less likely to have an appreciation.
Yeah, but ESAC approached this right. I take it now as my first renewal.
Yep.
4 years later, I get my broker's license. If it's been more than 2 years, I have to take this again. So this is not gonna be, I got it, I don't have to worry about it, because in
Right.
4 years, this course is gonna change. So that again was something I think
That's good.
was spot on when they brought it.
And we'll have the opportunity to watch it too. And see what that impact looks like. in
I think
terms of
that's
the
huge, I
redesign.
really do. I think it's,
Okay, between Summer on Teams
Well, you have
and
to
Jen
take
and
it.
Abby, I'm hoping
yeah,
we can get the
legal
slide
and legal 2
updated.
2 years.
For sure. Or in the initiative list, just to make sure we have, include the ESAC updates. Any more on this one we need to talk through? Okay, moving on, and I'll just tell you, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more initiatives, and then we're finished here. Next initiative is to examine and review criminal history and background check process. So, the commission asked the enforcement committee to review our processes for criminal history and background checks. That committee met early last year to discuss potential changes, and here's what came out of that. Improvements were made to the website to better explain the criminal history background process of how we review. And I will tell you that our fitness determinations numbers are up, right? Is that still true?
32%, yes.
Yeah, okay. We also changed Rule 541.1 to better track what the statute says on that front. And then we implemented some training for our customer service staff to better kind of coach people on how to pursue the fitness determination process if they have some criminal history, which I mentioned at the conference this week in one venue, about a third of Americans have some criminal history at this point. So, it's pretty common. Isn't that crazy? I don't know how. I mean,
Okay.
according to Google.
Right, so look beside you. One of
There's 12 of us here.
Look to your left, look to your right.
CPA.
Well, there you go. I think we will continue to improve on this process as, you can probably guess it, our database gets up and running, and then we can continue, the layers will be new database, the new website. I think we will be able to educate folks very well with a new website on just what the process is, how to navigate it, what they can expect. But we have made those changes to our current website. Anything to talk about there? Okay, next one is examine and address license portability. And this one has, so this was basically a kind of an initiative to wrap our brains around this topic of license portability. The commission asked for further education on what our laws and rules say about how portable Texas license is versus outside license coming to Texas. Staff drafted a white paper on that topic. If you want another copy of that, we're happy to share it with you. And one thing that has come out of that white paper, and really even was in the works ahead of it, but I think it will make progress on this front, and that is the work of the Broker Responsibility Working Group to suggest the statutory changes that toggle broker and or education and experience. I think that's going to help us better understand kind of what substantially equivalent is for the military spouses and military members, really just substantial equivalence in general.
What's will always be scary to me is geographic competence.
Yeah.
And you get a trailing spouse that hadn't lived in Texas
How
ever.
on earth?
And but I lived at the lake 15 years and I wouldn't sell a property at the lake that I live on because I don't know how. There are too many other intricacies to it because it's water departments and all the stuff that's now in legal one. How are they going to absorb that? And how is the broker going to know that they've absorbed it? And 3 deals with a mentor, that's nothing.
I asked someone recently, but that was selling property up in Denton, and she didn't live around, and I said, how do you must know a lot about Denton, how do you navigate up here? And she said, all you have to do is be able to read the data, that's it.
Yeah, that's all they
Good
think.
for her.
To have access to all that stuff.
And I don't, Scott, how do you all handle it? Because you have so many military out there. We don't have that many.
We haven't had a military, number one, even come close, substantially qualified. But we're separating because we're so far from everybody that we have an office in Midland, one, I don't even sell there. But if I was in Dallas, and you went from Dallas to Frisco to Plano or what, I don't know how the brokers would do it. But when you're so far separated, we're kind of self-contained. So I don't have to really deal with it.
I tell them to refer it. We got
Yeah.
agents up there.
Yeah.
Refer.
Yeah, and we tell them that.
Yeah, and then they don't. Because they're invincible.
Can't you have that
But
policy
it-
thing?
We do have,
Again, it goes back to the broker. The broker has to take a firm stance on it.
We don't find out till it's already been done.
Policy manual.
yeah, well, that's,
Yeah, today's world,
I think no matter what we do with this, the geographical competency is going to be the safeguard for the brokers.
well, I know we talked to our sales managers about this often, which is to say, I know you guys are just sitting there going, hey, what you think, but guess what, you're on the line. Personally, on this, for geographic competency, you better be thinking about that. And of course, probably it's gonna take a public hanging or something, probably to get everybody's attention, not sadly, but,
Mike's taking notes. Public hanging.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying, it's tough, but it's absolutely what we've been telling people for years, that they need to do anyway, because it's the right thing. And so now that's a good thing. You still have people that go, hey, if I can join Metro Tex, and I've got a brother-in-law in Dallas or something,
I do stop them from going to Houston, but that's, and Galveston. Galveston really is.
Galveston is worse.
Okay, next one.
We do too, they try to tell me that they're gonna listen, we're like, okay, we're gonna have this conversation right now.
Costs money, honey. get figured out.
We're not gonna pay.
We're not paying it, yeah.
Next one is explore mentorship and apprenticeship programs for new license holders. The commission asked the broker responsibility working group to look into this.
Are y'all sending us this slide or?
Happy to.
Great.
And, yeah, and we have it in a few different forms. Was this in the materials?
No, we did not do materials, for this, but we can send it to you. We have it like in a summary document.
That'd be great.
So competency and training best practices were incorporated into the broker responsibility course. And then they also, that same working group suggested rule changes to increase the oversight of sales agents on any certain type of transaction from 1 to 3. Of course, that was up for proposal yesterday, and y'all voted to propose that for the public comment period. I will just note, and it mentions this on the slide, that was originally intended for your August meeting. That was part of what sat at the governor's office for a little while, so that's why we're February 2023, and here we are on that one. Questions,
But
comments?
before you move to that, the way that rule was proposed is the broker's ultimately responsible for the supervision. So, and I like that because I might have a new agent, I might assign them Jackie on one listing, Jennifer on one listing, Paul on one listing. Only one of those people are a designated supervisor, but the other two sell 40 to 60 houses a year. So I can have them help them and supervise them without making them a designated supervisor, the way I read that.
What's the wording of that? It's not supervision, it's
Oversight.
Coaching and assistance or coaching and
Something like
training.
that.
Yeah.
Teaching and training.
So
Yeah, so
anyway,
whoever
leaving
the
that word
broker
supervising
sees.
out was
yes. So if the broker deems someone
Qualified.
appropriate for coaching for a particular type of transaction.
and I think that will make it easier to swallow for the brokers because I don't have to designate everybody in my office as a supervisor, which I will not.
Right. And that feels a little bit more like a mentorship.
Right.
You've done this before, take them under your wing.
Yeah, exactly.
And as it relates to that type, right, then you could have somebody who is really good at farm and ranch, is the one who does that, but if that person wants to switch over to doing something else, then you've got somebody else.
There's a good example in broker responsibility. It's a good
Okay.
example.
Anything on that one? Okay, last one. Address license expire process. So y'all requested that staff examine the current process that allows a broker to certify supervision during a period in which a sales agent license expired. This is what I call the look back and vouch process. So we presented possible options at the August workshop. Commission approved the draft and requested that rule change be proposed. So that is, y'all looked at that one yesterday. It is now for proposed, or will be out for public comment. It was intended for the November meeting. Again, got caught up in the governor's office.
Denise, do you see any pushback on that?
We haven't really experienced that because I don't know that
I know it's early, but
outside of, this group and staff kind of meetings and working with IT, running through the logistics, I don't know that many license holders are aware of this change, but the plan definitely includes a big communication push as a component because this is such a change in the process and the way renewals have worked for years. So we're definitely even working with, I think we were having a conversation about, when should this effective date be, to make sure there's plenty of time to notify the license holders before those renewal notices go out, to kind of put them on notice that this is changing. So no pushback.
How big is the problem?
Well, it's more that, it was a concern that came out of the commission that, a license holder could be expired for 5 months or 25 days. And with the checking of a box, their broker can say, oh, I was supervising them that whole time that they were expired. And so there are, and I don't have the data with me that we presented previously at a workshop, but it's a significant number of license holders that do it because it's actually an automated process, because so many of them just check that box and check off for their agents that it's part of the normal expiration process in the system.
So when somebody doesn't do anything and becomes administratively revoked, meaning they just fell off the face of the earth, how long is the revocation after the first?
Well, revocation, I just wanna make sure we're using expiration, because
Or
revocation
expiration,
has an
yeah, yeah.
enforcement component to it.
Well,
That's-
When you expire, you no longer have a license, right?
But it's not
Right,
revoked.
but you have 6 months to renew that expired license. So once a license has been expired, 6 months or more, it is no longer renewable. What that agent or license holder is filing is called a reinstatement application. So now you're gonna get a new 2-year license period. You don't have to take the exam. You've gotta take the CE that you would have had to take, and you can only do that for up to 2 years past the expiration date. The reinstatement.
And there's a fine,
There's an application fee. There is a fee.
$200.
Yeah, it's comparable to the initial application fee
Is that 2 years from the 6 months or the original one?
from the original expiration date. So then once a license has been expired for more than 2 years, that applicant has to come back. If that person was a broker, they have to come back in as a sales agent, take whatever education is required now. Perhaps promulgated contract forms wasn't required when they were initially licensed. Now that course will have to be completed. They've got to take the exam and go through that full application process again.
And if they're a broker, they have to wait 4 out of 5 years to be a broker again.
Right.
So they start all over,
But that's only if they surpass the 6 months.
the 2 years.
The 2 years.
The 2 years, right?
Does the broker give a notice about the salesperson in the office?
That, we do copy brokers on renewal notices and on the expire letter, but there are no additional notices that are sent out that we would copy the broker on once that 6 months has passed, or the 2 years. So at that point, it's on that applicant or that license holder to come back.
Broker is notified 90 days, 60 days, and 30 days out.
Well, and then about
Yeah.
10 days after the license expires, they get a
Right.
copy of the expire letter.
So if you could pull a report and do a census by within 6 months and then within the 2 years and then completely gone, could you do that? Or is that?
I can.
I'm asking difficult questions.
No, it's just about how to pull the data.
Yeah.
And the statuses, I'm already thinking in terms of how that data looks in the system, but I could definitely explore that with IT and see what we could extract. Are you, just so I have a clear understanding, are you wanting like percentages, like roughly,
Numbers,
compared
like-
to the number of
like
license
I've got-
holders we have, this is how many
Out
are.
of 236,000, I've got 10,000 that are in the 6 month, expiration bucket. And
Well-
then of those,
At any given moment.
at any given moment, yeah.
Okay, I think
And see, we can track that over, every time we meet or every once or twice a year and see if that number is going up or going.
You could almost tell that within the finances that we get
All the renewals.
90% from the,
From the type of fees we collect.
right. It seems like I've seen that little slice of the pie.
I think you're gonna see a lot of it. We're not gonna see as many people 2 years expired coming back in the market. People came back in the market because the market was so hot.
I tell you haven't had a problem
So
with
you'll
us since
see
we were fined
After 6 months, they're
$8,700
gonna come up
in 1999.
more like about 80%.
No more problems with
Gotta
us.
see what the attrition.
But the attrition is all based on the market.
I know.
I had 3 agents come back that were out of the business and the market got really hot. They came back, took promulgated, retook the test, yeah.
And attrition are based on.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that we're gonna kind of revamp, we have an article on our website, but we're gonna kind of change the headline and make sure that it kind of speaks to where we are currently, is to educate license holders on what the difference is between renewing inactive versus expiration, because as this market changes, I think there are a lot of people who are like, well, it's not working for me, I'll just get out, but then as the market changes again, we'll want to get back, and so there is a bottom line implication for us in terms of how many renew and, but more than anything, I think it's important for the license holder to understand what, what it's taken to get the license and what it will take to get again, should they wish.
Our first recommendation is always just set yourself to inactive if you've got health issues or, we've heard a wide array of reasons for why someone's not able to take the CE. The first recommendation is always set to inactive, keep renewing. Because once your license is expired, now you're running up against these deadlines. You have 6 months to renew, you have 2 years to reinstate after that expiration date, and then you're looking at starting all over again.
And let me give you an example. We had somebody in the gallery yesterday. Her son just got his second kidney transplant. The first one was rejected. His license expires. Number one, he's not mentally, expiring this month, capable or physically capable to take the CE. And so got with Denise and they'll email, but move it inactive, get your medical stuff taken care of and can come back. We need to communicate that to our licensees, because I wasn't even sure what to do. I was like, hey.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think it's part of our duty to communicate that to licensees, because getting a license is huge, but that's the least important thing on their priorities right now.
Well, one thing, I think a lot of the license holders that I talk to, maybe don't realize you can stay inactive for 20 years if you'd like.
I'd say that's true.
And when that's explained, that's, okay, yeah, 'cause coming back to active is it's a very simple process. You take your CE, request a broker to sponsor you online. It's really done, there's no fee to do that,
No fee.
No fee to request sponsorship, so it's a very easy process for them to come back to active. It's implicitly, exponentially more complicated if it expires, because now the clock is ticking on all kinds of other requirements.
We hear from a lot of people who say, I used to be in the industry, license expired, I'm trying to get back in, can you please wait and, here are all the circumstances of why.
Just got a nice letter about that.
And we can't.
Yeah. No, there's statutory.
Because it's a
statutory requirements.
And those are sometimes hard emails to read, it's not like, I just forgot. It's real
My
stuff,
wife
but we
got
don't
it.
have any waiver provision.
That's it on initiatives.
A lot of them, though, were just, I'm gonna go get a real job.
Right. Then they change their mind.
And then they change their mind.
Is it a real job?
It is.
No, but I'm just saying there is.
The irony, Mark, the irony.
There is this phrase that for a long time, you guys probably too, it's like, and when they say that, you're like.
Oh, yeah, I always remember the applicant that wanted to come in and make just enough for a new work role every year.
Right. Or a vacation.
Jim turned around and said, how much do you spend on clothes?
Well, you quit hearing the challenge of having, at say, 236,000. These, it just breeds that kind of for lack of.
Easy money, it's easy money what we do.
All right, agenda 4, discussion on broker responsibility working group, makeup and most recent recommendations, BRWG.
Do you want me to
Fire away.
You introed it a little bit yesterday. So the broker responsibility working group, the most recent version of it started, I think it was maybe March of 2019. Trying to remember all my dates of 2019. That group has, with the exception of Commissioner Leonard is an exception, right? She was on that group, she moved to the commission and we replaced that position. But it's essentially been the same people. And so we're looking at that, it's been a group that's, Abby and I kind of dug into the history, we looked at what their mission is, there's been discussion I know Commissioner Leonard's mentioned it to me before, the executive committee brought it up, of what are we doing with that group, right? Are they just sort of a standing group? What's the process for it? Are they an advisory committee? Are they, an individual working group? That's a little bit different. When you've had the same group going for this long, it starts to look a lot like an advisory committee, if that's the direction the commission wants to go. We need to write rules, similar to what we have for ESAC, for inspector committee, things like that. And so, I think the question is, what does the commission want to do with it? And you can go back, I didn't cover the first, but, currently what we have on the website is that it's a working group charged with examining experience requirements for potential substitution of education requirements to become a broker. They also review licensing requirements, minimum competency requirements, mentorship, minimum service requirements in relation to service fees, and temporary out-of-state registrations for commercial transactions. Those are some of the topics they've discussed over the years, the different versions of the group. This group has, you've seen a lot of the recommendations already, but they initially tackled that education experience recommendation that we're hoping to see this legislative session. They've been working on those rules, the mentorship, that kind of stuff. It was initially formed to help the commission examine broker responsibility issues during non-session years in order to help shape those initiatives, because a lot of times recommendations that are going to come out of that group are going to be statutory changes. So right now, we've got 9 broker members, and they've all served since 2020. And the question now is, what would the commission like to do with it? And I really see it as 2 options. You could keep it as a true working group, but transition it to you keep it as a working group, transition it to a true ad hoc working group, similar to what we're seeing with unauthorized practice of law, the brokerage services groups that are meeting to address a specific topic. That's one direction you could take, and not have it just kind of be a quarterly meeting that happens and they come up with the topics, or the commission directs them with things. And so, we put down some pros and cons. The pros would be it would allow the group to focus, if you made it more specific meetings, like you gave them a task and they met just to discuss that task, it'd be more focused. You'd know they were, addressing the issues that are presented by the commission. It would require a more intensive meeting schedule over a shorter period of time, and anyone who's been on these ad hoc working groups knows exactly what I'm talking about, because I think that UPL group has met more times than any advisory committee this year, and they're just an ad hoc group. But the other option is to make this a standing advisory committee with rules, so similar to ESAC, similar to inspector. That's been the course that they've been on, and that they meet quarterly. And the pros would be there'd be clear expectations and processes for committee membership. So what we would do is we would write rules for this group, similar to what you see with ESAC. So terms, who serves on it, is there an experience level that you want? Do you want a public member? We would want to flesh that out. What would that group look like as a formal advisory committee? And we would get the rules in place. And then the cons are less flexibility, and there's potential for less focused discussion. So I haven't seen it as much, but sometimes it can feel like a committee meets just because it's supposed to meet, right? I'm remembering there was one meeting that we had, and it wasn't BRWG, but I think it was 45 minutes. And then it was wow, okay, that ended up feeling like it was a meeting just to meet because it's on the calendar. Now, we can always help generate things to talk about. But those are kind of the pros and cons. So looking for some direction for this group on which of these paths you have interest in, and then we can come back with, some structure, some outlining of what that would look like.
I like the advisory. I'll be honest with you, when broker responsibility was put together 15 years ago, I was one of the first members, we established the points, we knew the point system would be adjusted, whatever. I think a work group, you give them one task, broker services, unauthorized practice of law. And when you put a working group together, I mean, how long do they stay on? You know, there's no, anyway. I don't know if we have enough for advisory group, but I think that's probably where it probably needs to go. I mean, to me, a working group is get one problem taken care of and you're out.
Right.
And this has been in for, I think, 15 years. I mean,
Bill Jones.
So from your all standpoint, what would be the most help? You know,
What's the staff want?
yeah, I'm curious.
How much time?
I mean, you can make the argument probably either way, but I mean, what, in terms of the issues that you have or you see, I mean, is it easier to establish a task force, for lack of a better word, you know, to take care of a specific issue or?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a position one way or the other, honestly, in terms of like scheduling meetings of groups of people. I think that's always a task, right? And so in some ways, advisory committees, like the way we have them where they schedule them out through, like they'll schedule their whole year, that feels easier. Of course, it always feels easier to schedule an ad hoc group until you have, 6 follow-up meetings that you've gotta have right away before. So I don't know that we have a preference, truly, we can make either one work. It's been functioning essentially as an advisory committee. I just think we're at the sort of push-pull of, do you wanna call it that, or do you want to keep it one of those more focused groups?
and I'd love to keep it as a focus group, but we need to establish some type of parameters for who we have in there. And, yeah,
And that's, so, yeah,
and I think the advisory group does that. If there's nothing for them to advise on, then they don't advise.
Which is great. I think they have a lot of ideas. I think they're very beneficial to everyone.
Well, that group's very diverse, because Jan and Jason and I worked on that. We considered the size of their agency, their geographical location, I can't remember if we did time in business. So it's,
A big spreadsheet with all these different.
yeah,
well, that,
there were
right,
80 or 90 people that wanted to be on that committee.
But once you appoint them, and this is up for no punches, once you appoint them, they're there. And there's been people in every committee you've ever worked on, whether the Realtor Association or here, they're there for the resume, they don't contribute, they don't attend, they don't do anything but take up a chair. And with the advisory group, at least we can,
There's a term.
I mean, and I'll ask staff, do they participate? Do they bring ideas? Are they a benefit to the advisory group? And here, they're there till death do us part.
That's a good.
That's the advantage I see. And I'm not saying anybody on there is like that. I'm just saying it gives you the ability, to restructure.
Well, it also looks like when that fictitious person is.
Right, yeah.
So to speak.
That's why I like the advisory groups. There's some type of term limits.
Oh, that's as
As a working
working
group, the
group,
current working group elected their own chair. So they really are acting like an advisory committee, just without parameters.
right. And so you want rules, you always want rules.
well, right, and so whoever the chair is, if somebody's not participating, they need to let that be known that they're not participating, and so they should be.
But how do
Do
you,
we
There's
have,
not rules for
No.
that.
well, then we should develop rules.
yeah, that's what I mean.
It sounds like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say consensus and then y'all say, no, yes. The staff should work on rules to make it an advisory committee, similar to our others.
Yes,
And we
just
call it broker responsibility advisory committee.
structure, yeah.
Okay.
Working at.
Do we have any other questions that we need feedback on before we do that?
No, I'll say this, if you have thoughts on what you would like that to look like in terms of, like what ESAC's rules are or inspector, if you have thoughts, if you wanna email them to me, I'll try and incorporate it into the draft rules.
Do we need the committees to have participation requirements or attendance requirements or anything?
No, do the.
There are
does
some,
It's back
there are
to
some
the-
limited ones,
Uh,
for like ESAC.
It's not enforced.
Well, I don't think we've had a problem, in the time that I've been here with that, in terms of people not coming to meetings. So now, sometimes,
Yeah,
you know, cause some of these have a virtual component.
We changed the rule for the
I'm
public members
amazed
to
at
go
the
from 3 to
interest
6
and the
years.
desire
So
to
that
be
helped a
involved.
lot for that.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
unlike
this
anything I've ever seen.
This group certainly, I think, has like all active people.
Yeah.
Now, when we do a selection committee,
Unexcused and
I
excused.
think,
Consecutive.
you'll wanna be mindful of, you know, keeping some and replacing some so that you're not starting a whole new group, cause that, you lose the work of the other group. It's also, as I imagine you all remember, a very big task to, you know, get 9 appointed.
I think setup is key. I'm gonna say this. I don't think there's room for a public member because I don't think they understand the operation of a brokerage. And I'm minimizing public members here. It's just this is truly how to move the brokerage forward. And I really think it needs to be
It's the guts of the business.
brokers, yeah.
This may be a terrible idea, but y'all, what do you think about having some provision that requires a variety of types of representation?
I think that
That's what we
we
did.
looked at before. I mean, if there is somebody that is little town versus big city, small
Large
broker,
brokerage,
big
yeah.
broker.
But let's not have it
Geographic.
rules. Let's not have 3 big brokers, 2 little brokers, 3 East Texas, 3 West Texas.
Yeah.
I think
Just
that's
let
the
that be part of
selection
the
committee's,
consideration.
but I don't wanna quote it.
Since
Right,
our environment
right.
has changed too, how do you put in that virtual component? Are you required to be in person? Can you be virtual every single time? I mean,
I'll tell you that there's a financial implication to that as well, that I think may be something you want to think about in terms of if you require physical presence, will you reimburse? And then what does that do to a travel budget for TREC? So just cost benefit.
because you do reimburse now for broker responsibility, right?
We will reimburse all of our committees for travel.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, we also encourage virtual participation.
I mean, some of these committees, it just seems like sometimes virtual is easier because A, cost, but B, if your meeting's gonna be 2 hours or whatever, driving
Yeah.
for however long,
Yeah.
reimbursing for gas, reimbursing for all that, it doesn't make sense. The time.
Right, so do we have a consensus to kind of move forward with the advisory group
Think so.
format?
Yeah, we'll bring you some, I will look at the process for that, for getting the rules. Maybe we take it to exec committee and then bring to the full group as a proposal. We'll look at the timing on all of that.
Okay. All right, ready to move to 5, advisory committee recommendation process?
Yes.
Well, this is the rest of the.
This is the rest of the, sorry, yes, we're gonna look at the current BRWG recommendations. I don't know, do you wanna take a break or no? You can say no.
We'll take 5 minutes.
If no one needs it, don't do it.
All right, let's
Okay,
push through
Okay,
it.
okay, this is usually where we.
You need a comfort break, then comfort.
Okay. Okay, so, we put this on the agenda for today, and I think, it is relevant to the next item too. So I wanna you to keep this conversation in mind as we look at what to do with advisory committee recommendations moving forward. But I went ahead and pulled together the current broker responsibility working group recommendations. And I wanted to just get them, you know, at the workshop level discussed. The good news before we walk through all of these are, as most broker responsibility, just said broker responsibility working group recommendations are, they're statutory in nature. But that's good, that's a good thing because the timing is right. So we're already starting to plan for the next session. Which sometimes seems wild, but that's true, like right now is the time where you start getting the ideas, and then you start talking about, well, what about this and that, and what would this look like, and where would it go, and what stakeholder input, things like that. So, the time is ripe for discussion of these, should the commission want to move forward. And I'll just walk through them, and if you have any questions, conversations, just, thoughts like, is the commission interested in pursuing this, are they not? Do we wanna add it to the list, things like that. So the first one is a recommendation to register license holders performing property management services, provide that registration information to the public, and require an education component for those license holders.
I will tell you, in New Mexico, if I do property management, when I renew my broker's license, I have to say I do property management. This says if any license holder is performing property management. So if I have a leasing agent that goes and shows a house next door to them, they have to register as a property manager, then someone calls them, they're not a property manager. They did a property management service. Because when we get a listing for rent, whoever lives in that neighborhood is the first contact. If you open that house, that's property management services. I don't want them listed as a property manager with my office, because they're not. Does that make sense? And I don't think they need to take a property management class to show a house.
Right.
But that's property management services. I have the front desk, they collect rent. Okay, they're licensed. That's property management services, but they're far from a property manager. Does that make sense? And I don't want anybody calling them thinking, well, you're registered as a property manager, what can you know? I think that goes back to the broker's supervision, broker responsibility. I like the idea of property managers being educated, but ultimately y'all have to let the broker decide that he's supervising his people. And property management activity, yeah, I think it sounds really good, but when you get down in the weeds, okay, it's not such a good idea. I mean, help me where I'm missing this.
It's the people that are doing it that don't know squat about what they're doing.
But the person that shows that house for the rental, they don't know squat about property management, but they can open a house.
I know, but
Because they're licensed.
it's the agents and or brokers that get stuck, and we were that 100 years ago, that we got stuck because the houses didn't sell and we took them in and tried to help people. And so in that being helpful is how you get in trouble.
Yeah.
And
So showing a lease, a home for lease, is that a property management?
Activity, yes.
so
It's a licensed
change-
activity.
No, I
change the word.
understand that, but I'm just saying in terms of how definition. of-
Collecting rent.
No, collecting rent,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, you've got
I-
a tenant. you show
Michael,
the
help me
property.
out. I mean, is that,
Well, this is a reasonable
It's a
point.
possibility for sure.
yeah.
What's
Especially
considered
since it's
property
up for lease.
management versus some other type of brokerage
Right,
activity?
I guess that's my.
I mean, if
I never
I
really
have,
considered showing a lease, showing it.
Mark, if you work for me and I have a property manager, I put you as first contact,
Right.
that's property management services, I would think.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Getting the application fees and checking the credit, and who's checking the credit? Who's doing all those things?
Okay.
Mike, where do you see the most problems? Well, in property management as far as,
Just from a historical perspective, the industry itself has cleaned itself up quite a bit over the past decade.
You scared us.
Because you got rid of agents doing property
A
management.
lot of the times, it's like one bad apple that ruins the bunch. I think as a whole, the people that do it are really professional. The groups I've spoken with really handle it well. So you find out people that do this one-off stuff where they're helping someone out, like you were just mentioning, and they get themselves underwater, so to speak, and don't know what to do, and that's where a complaint files. People that do this professionally and take it seriously, they don't really fall on our radar.
And in New Mexico, like I said, I register as a broker. So if they want to come back and say, the broker, you say I do property management, then that would be one thing. But licensees, I
Did you say that in
have to sign an affidavit
in New Mexico?
that I do property management, and we made 7,000.
So on
in
this
Mexico.
number one, it sounds like the answer from those we've heard from is no, we don't want to move forward.
The way it's structured.
Change the word services to something else that lets off those people that show the lease houses, because new agents like to start that way, that they can make money faster. But
So not a total rejection of this concept.
Well, if it
Because
said
services,
brokerages
like,
that perform
was she talking
property
about changing
management,
to like administration?
that would be,
Oh,
that would
Say
be one.
that, I'm sorry.
Brokerages that perform property management, then you're identifying the brokerage, but I'm not having to identify
A sales agent?
each licensee.
Did you had
I
something?
didn't, she said, get rid of services, and I'm just saying, is it the word administration, like you're administering? I don't know, what did
It's
you
the
say?
definition, the devil's in the details of property management services.
License holder is what I gotta get rid of. I mean,
You want it to be at the brokerage level.
yeah, and I think like Michael said, the brokers are doing it right, are doing it right. And if you're not doing it right, hell, you're probably not gonna register anyway, but.
It's the residential agent, sales agents that get hooked into it. But I think we really cover it pretty heftily in Legal 1 and Legal 2. And we have for several years.
That's true.
And luckily, we haven't had any, I haven't had any
So,
real
so
problems.
do you have a lot of license holders that venture into property management? Is that an issue?
It has been in the
Well,
past, not.
It's part of brokerage activity like you can do property management as a license holder. The question is, do you need to designate them as that? Because it takes how would I say this? It takes maybe a special set of education to be good at that? Is
It's
that?
been named.
Well, that's, right, so
Well,
you'd be,
So you get back to the question is, should you require license holder to certify or register as property managers and require education? That is the crux of the question.
Well, that is, and then the other thing is still like, in my mind, is if you show, to me, if you're managing the property,
You're a manager.
you're a property manager, you're collecting rents, you're doing repairs, you're doing all these things. The question is, beyond that, if somebody is, showing that for a tenant, because now it's listed, but, let's say there's a lease listing. Okay, so the question is the person that lists it for lease, assuming they're not managing the property, now if they are, that's different. If they weren't managing the property, is that property management activity? Is the person then that brings a potential tenant,
They're a leasing agent.
their
No,
leasing
basically.
agent, is that?
Right.
I think it is.
So, I mean, again, that's what I'm
Well,
saying.
I think
we do a
property,
couple thousand,
the
but
definition
here-
of a property manager has been established, right? For example, collecting rents.
Arranging
Does
repairs.
arranging repairs. Does the property manager understand that when he collects rent on behalf of someone else, there are certain requirements to remit that money to its intended?
Yeah, well, and that's back to the Kansas, there's been a lot of focus on that in these renewal courses, that sort of thing.
And those requirements require education, component to them. And so you get back to the original question, if a license holder is performing property management, which is not what you're talking about, you're already registered as you do property management.
No, but
That's not
I'm
right.
saying the brokerage would be registered, but I'm not registering every agent that shows a house or opens a house or verifies a repair as a property manager, because I don't want John Q. Public to call them and say, you're a property manager. I want the brokerage. Brokerage is fine, but when you say license holder, that to me opens a can of worms.
so that seems like an alternate idea, or alternate
Yeah,
recommendation.
because license holders,
Just
it's
to be
like,
clear, like that
someone has to
that
be
doesn't
responsible.
exist.
and the broker is responsible.
Yeah.
Well, right now they are, right? So what we're talking about is, and Chelsea just said it, so your license your agent license, your broker, well, it's part of brokerage services. So long as you're authorized as an agent, as long as you're authorized to do it by a broker, you're good. But your license encompasses this topic. The recommendation is, is there interest in pursuing a registration component that would be both inward and outward facing, and additional education as it relates to property management? And when you start doing that, you're adding requirements to something that they can already do, so statutory change.
For the broker and the licensing.
Yeah, here it's anyone that would be engaging in it, right?
I would think that, like Scott says, someone has to be on the hook for it, right?
And they are.
Broker is.
They are.
And they are right now.
And if you have a complaint, then TREC needs to have the ability to reach out.
And they did.
And they did.
Right, and so I agree with you.
The only-
Because licensees does not mean brokers, it means somebody that's sponsored by a broker, right?
The only thing this is
Both,
doing is,
yeah.
this is the brokers telling them, TREC, I do property management. That's all this does. And now I'm required to take a
And
class.
require education. Right, so do you want to reject this recommendation? Do you want to ask for something different? Do you want to talk about it at a workshop? Like, what do you want to do with this recommendation?
I don't like this recommendation just because of the license holders. It goes back to that mentorship. Can I have Mark go on a listing agreement with a new agent and coach them through it without designating him as a supervisor? And so I reject it until it says, the license holder is what? Yeah,
I think you're expanding from brokers to the licensees, right?
yeah.
And so you're expanding on what you already have in place. Right.
Scott, in
So-
your company,
No, you would reject it.
if you manage a property, do you list it for lease on MLS usually? So anybody could list it within your office, that's not
No.
property management?
No,
No?
no, it is listed. One of our property managers is the second listing agent, and we have a showing agent listed first that lives in the neighborhood. All applications go to the property manager. Yeah, and again,
So what
The problem is that it's not property managers that create the issue. It is John Doe Seller who is public.
Yeah.
And he has his property listed with Delora. Delora finds that the market's not gonna allow it, so I'm gonna lease it.
Right.
So then Delora helps him lease it and goes through all the signing of the lease and.
pays for the yard to be mowed.
Background
And that's-
checks.
That's
Yeah,
management
and
services.
that's the problem.
Well,
So if you offer courses is what I'm thinking, just offer courses,
yeah,
and if I'm gonna get into it, I can take the course.
yeah, because, yeah. I mean, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right, in that example, and of course, you know, what we do, hopefully, is we say, we're gonna list it for lease. But, we recommend the third-party services to the seller,
Exactly.
credit check, blah, blah, blah. And the seller then, who's the manager in our minds, regardless of if they call themselves that, they make those choices. So we don't really consider just the semantics of saying we're managing. We think we're leasing it, and that's why I asked the question, so
Our biggest
that's.
problem has been with, foreign investors, and
You got it.
we speak 30 different languages in our company, and therefore they are helping those people in their culture
And
that
that's where
speak
you get
their
that.
language.
Yeah.
And that's what has created the few issues that we've had.
And I understand the mission behind this. You identify whether or not you do property management, but I think it has to be at the brokerage level. It cannot be at the license.
I agree with that. I mean, that's for sure.
And so what would be the purpose in doing that identification? Would that be an out, because right now you could do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not
You can already do
sure
it.
it
So what's
changes
the-
anything from where we are.
In New Mexico, why I think they do it, this is being recorded, is they have the ability to audit.
Do you want that ability?
I think it's overbearing. But I mean, I'm just saying,
What's
I mean,
Mike Midden on?
the license holder is just a huge issue to me.
He'd be good.
The license holder has to register as a property manager.
It's a commercial.
I just think if you've already got the
What the
responsibility.
licensee-
I'm not sure
Major sponsor.
what this adds to
Those are not property managers.
the.
I mean, I'm not property managers.
You're on the hook right now. I think they're looking for an answer to the questions. At this point, I think we give it.
You're required.
Hold on, for people on the
Yeah.
computer, we need one
Yeah,
conversation.
That's a statute.
What
You
was
could-
your question?
If you're gonna, could you do something just like if you're gonna perform property management activity, you need to take this course. It'll be listed on your courses online, and so if there's anything that happens, you go back and say, oh, well, you didn't take the course that you're required to take.
And what course are you gonna require?
No, that, they were talking about, I think broker responsibility was talking about making a new course for that.
Yeah.
Do you do that? I'm playing devil's advocate just for purposes of kind of talking it through, because it kind of starts us down a path. Is there a similar need for those working in commercial, farm and ranch, these other kind of subsets?
Well, real property managers, that's all they do. My daughter went to Montana and she only did property management for the rich and famous. She wasn't doing any real estate as far as selling, leasing, or doing any of that at that time. Now she is, but at that time. And, that's all she did. That's what Mike Mendenhall in Houston, he has a huge, that's all he does is property management, period.
I would like to put this on the back burner.
Yeah.
I mean, give me more, what is the class? Is it gonna be a 60-hour class? You follow me?
Quite honestly, how could it hurt somebody?
It was in our thing.
Whether you're
I-
commercial or.
It's not, it's just it's a statutory change, so if you're gonna do it, you want, this is
No,
the
just
stuff,
saying,
yeah. So if you can, if you want, we can, we got years, right? So we can put this back burner, I'd see everyone kind of think about it, if you wanna provide me with any feedback, in the interim, or we'll put it on for a future agenda. So the second one, the second one is a recommendation, this is also a statutory one, to require that all sales agents take the broker responsibility course prior to their application for a broker license, and that all brokers take the broker responsibility course before each renewal. So right now you have a statute that's very specific on who must take the broker responsibility course. So this would be a change to that to include these folks. So all sales agents, prior to the application to become a broker, and then, everyone is part of their renewal.
I like the
I
renewal
like
part.
that too.
We don't have to do that.
Is there anything in broker responsibility that's not covered in brokerage?
I would
Because you have to
say
take
yes.
brokerage.
Yes.
A lot of it, you think?
Well, I would think, the key to the broker responsibility course, the 6-hour renewal course, is that it's primarily an update on, industry trends, the competency, issues that exist currently, and we revise that every 2 years. And I would say that the real estate brokerage course, the 30-hour course, is the baseline expectations,
I've never taken it.
So.
Yeah.
I like this just
Don't you
because
teach
if
it?
I'm a sole broker, I don't have to take it. I renew in December, and then in February, I sponsor 30 people, and I don't have to take it again until I renew the next cycle. That's the way the statute reads now, correct? If I'm an individual broker without supervising for the last 6 months, I don't have to take it, but then I can turn around and sponsor people and not be responsible again until I renew again.
Yeah, just at renewal.
That's not statute, but that's
Right,
Right,
the
yeah.
requirement is if you sponsored any agents
in the last 6
during your
months.
license term. So it's a renewal requirement that applies
Okay.
to the license.
And what they want is, before you can sponsor an agent, you have to take a broker responsibility course. And that was the gist of what I got out of broker
Well, and I
responsibility.
think everyone too, so on top of that, not even
All
before, but
sales
then all
agents
sales
take
agents as well.
Prior to
For
that
being a
cycle.
broker.
For applying for broker.
Okay, so
And then
then,
every
Yeah.
broker, regardless of whether they sponsor.
well, I mean,
Well,
I
there's-
think that's a good idea.
No, that's not what it says.
Okay, so put it on the ledge list?
I mean, it says,
So the recommendation that came from them was sales agent, you take it before you apply for a broker license.
Check.
And you take it at broker renewal. There was also there's also discussion, but it wasn't their recommendation ultimately of just everyone has to take it.
I think that's.
But that wasn't the recommendation, I'm just, that conversation also happened, and I've heard that, I've
Well,
heard
that
people
might
say
be a
that
good idea.
outside of that group, right? So I think for this one, it sounds like there is interest in this recommendation. And so we can put that, we can add this to the list, right, of legislative considerations. Something I think to monitor in the interim, are the changes to the brokerage course, right? Because we're seeing ESAC make some changes, and as they open up the other courses, I would recommend this, if you do wanna pursue it, ultimately also get some ESAC discussion about what this would look like, right? Cause they're probably the appropriate advisory committee to really dig in there. And that's true, a lot of BRWG recommendations can go over there. And then, so monitor brokerage, monitor the brokerage course, and maybe that's it, and the ESAC component, and the other things they're going to do. But we can add that one to the list, it seems like.
Consensus or
I feel some nods, some head nods in the room, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so, 3 and 4 both deal with broker associates.
Level.
You love the recs or you love broker associates?
I love the recommendation.
These are recommendations. The first one is to notify a broker associates affiliated broker of TREC disciplinary action and to display all broker associate affiliations relationships on the TREC website. So for the public members and for anyone, I mean, for everyone really, I think the broker associate, if we can describe it, it's usually easy for me to draw on the board, but a broker associate is someone who holds a broker's license, who associates, affiliates with other brokers, a brokerage, in engaging in business. But they hold the same license, like a broker associate license is not a different type of license. They're just somebody who does business with other brokerages. And there's a ton of them, right? You think of all the brokers who work for, I'm gonna just make one up that I know, Realty Austin, right? Broker associates, right? That
is one.
So that's what a broker associate is.
And right now, public members, you look on the TREC website, you don't know that.
Right, and the reason for that is
You don't
because.
know that they're affiliated with Realty Austin.
Right, and the reason for that, and I think like for me this was helpful, is that is not, it's funny that your name is written right there.
Yesterday, IT needed to know my wingspan, how high I could reach. That is why that is there. I'm so sorry.
Okay, it's for the new.
For the new board,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
So I'll just, I think I mentioned this, I was like, we also need new markers. So you've got, we'll just say, brokerage, you've got, that includes your designated broker. We've got a straight line to an agent, right?
It's a Valentine.
And then, I can't help it. And then I'm gonna draw a dotted line to a broker associate. And I'm going to tell you that what I'm describing right now, I do not mean to imply that this is less of a relationship in terms of our regulatory authority. We regulate this relationship, broker agent, right? That's what we have in statute to regulate. There's no reference of a broker to broker relationship. So there's no additional, now this may not be true in the civil court, but in terms of the Real Estate Act, there is no additional level of regulation between these two. So if a broker associate does something in violation of the act, TREC is going to go after that broker associate. It would take an independent, could be related, but an independent actual act of the brokerage to be tied into that. So we stop when we get to broker. Now, if we have an agent who does something bad, we're gonna stop till we get to, when we get to broker. So we're gonna draw them in, we have the authority to do that, that's that broker-agent relationship. This is really a business relationship, as it currently stands. And so a broker associate could affiliate with multiple brokerages. They could do it for totally, sometimes it's office sharing, sometimes it's something like Commissioner Miller just said, where she is a broker associate under a brokerage, like there's a a variety of ways that can happen. So, that is why I know, cause I'm with you, when the website thing first came up, I was like, it seems like really reasonable, okay. And then you start looking at what that relationship looks like from a regulatory perspective, and it's like, well, we've gotta have the authority to collect that information.
Well,
And we don't.
But we can get it, I mean, well, we can ask for it.
I mean, can we simply possibly just define what a broker associate is in the licensing act? Maybe even say, I even wrote it down, sales agent or a sponsored sales agent does include a broker affiliated with or working with or under a broker of record, also known as a broker associate.
So so you're saying that the broker associate is really just a sales agent?
I mean, not saying license wise, but when somebody is affiliated with like Mark.
which is usually driven by an independent contractor agreement.
Exactly.
So I mean, the way the relationship is established is, an independent contractor relationship. Now, we have that with a sales associate too, agent, but also, we have a broker associate contract, which is essentially the same thing. And it can be different for different brokers, I would assume, but, obviously, but in our case, we say, hey, if you're doing real estate services, you're only doing it with us. Now, realizing that, that's a choice they make.
Right.
But
That's what you had.
Yes, it is, and then, but it's also, that takes the messy out of the transaction coordinator and out of working for all these different agencies at the same time.
But if you put the broker associate under the broker in the statute, that's gonna put the liability under the broker too. Broker associate's he's a broker, and he's just associating with another broker, so there's really not a definition of broker associate in the statute.
No, that's what we're saying, define
Right,
what a
and I don't
broker
know
associate is.
if there should be, because the broker, their discipline stands on its own.
Yeah, but, I think that
Yes,
from a
I do.
statute.
I was gonna say, and I said, don't you have a confidentiality issue?
But I think if the website
Is there
identifies who
notification
the
to the
broker's
broker
working
associate?
with,
Well, right, so that's why I'm saying you mean in terms of notice of discipline? Yes, which is why you need statutory change, like you would really need to carve out, define broker associate, you'd need to get that right to notify discipline, similar to what you have with broker agent. We'd have to look into what that looks like,
Well, I
honestly,
think we
I don't
also
know how
have
you
to
do
look
it.
at what is the method of association, right?
How connected are you?
Several
Yeah, I mean,
states
I mean,
have that already.
mine will be.
Several states already have stuff like,
Broker associate are.
Oh, sure.
yeah, North
Yes.
Dakota,
Yeah,
California, tons of them.
It's an agent.
Well, that's the point, is, what is the method of it? When you call them an associate, then they're associated how? Well, through typically, to my knowledge, an independent contractor relationship, which addresses things like, what have they committed to? Not what are all the things they could do theoretically, but I mean, like in our case, we say, hey, if you're gonna be a broker associate of ours, you're only gonna represent, you're not going to be doing, business for Susie and Johnny brokers, it's just with us. So, and that ties back into the D&O coverage and, some other things that are offered vis-a-vis that relationship.
At the end of the day, your name is still on the door, so if they
Right.
go out and do something crazy, it still represents you.
Well, and
But that's, right, and that's a civil,
No, I'm just saying, it's his reputation and whatever goes down the tubes, because that person's out there acting under his name.
but he's also making money, I mean, that's that decision, right? You're deciding as you're going to take on broker associates and what that looks
Well, the
like.
broker associates are, at least in my world, they're walking around with a business card, website, whatever, that's got my company on it.
Exactly.
And that's good, from the public perspective, but I do imagine there's some level of confusion if we're talking about the public, and that's really where I'm coming from.
In our company, and I don't know if it's just me and our company, because we got a bunch of broker associates, but I have to have a branch, or I've always had a branch office that's the company address. So would the disciplinary action go to the company address, and it wouldn't have Jim's name on it, it would just have my name on it, I suppose. But he would know about it.
Well,
I don't know if that.
Well, there's not a
accomplishes-
notice that right now, if a
Right now,
broker
there isn't.
associate, if you're,
You made it.
unless it's in your policies and procedures that
well,
you've got to
and I mean,
notify.
that's
and-
the thing, and, you know, that's where, right now it need to be, because the other thing is, you know, if you want help responding to this thing, we're gonna have to know about it, and blah, blah, blah. But
Well, right, and so I think this is, and these are two pretty different recommendations, right?
Yeah, they are.
So, when you look at this, and Commissioner Pena has mentioned this, like the notice of TREC, opening a case against a broker associate, like that's a little bit more complicated. I think there's things that have really got to be looked into because, like I just said, you're essentially notifying someone's business associate that they could be getting into trouble. And I think that starts to feel complicated unless there's, well, that doesn't, it is complicated unless you've got something in statute that's, that's creating a little bit similar to the broker-agent relationship, right? Or at least a provision, we would want to be able to rely on a provision of statute that says specifically we can do that. And I think that makes sense, right, from what I explained, because that's a business relationship. There's no extra layer of responsibility on the brokerage as it relates to that broker associate, the way there is for an agent. And there's a statute for that, for agent broker, right?
But is there other cases for broker associates being affiliated with multiple brokerages?
I did not know, but Jan said she actually had an agreement with another broker that anything below one area they did in the other. So that would be, again, the agreement between the brokers to be.
So yes, there's
you could define it, right?
potential. And then how do you know which one,
Who's the property?
do you notify
It's-
everyone?
it's
I
all
mean, so it's
based on where
that's the
property
conversation, like, this was a big conversation. And I think it probably goes to the bigger, these are two specific recommendations. Do you just address these recommendations? Do you wanna go to a bigger discussion on broker associates generally
That's
speaking?
probably getting bigger.
And the
deals.
purpose would be for what? To notify.
complaints.
It's really for the public to know who, I mean,
But we're notifying the associate broker.
I think three's gonna have big legislative statute issues. I think the relationship, I mean,
What is it accomplish?
that way the consumer knows,
But that's not a consumer,
That's not
that's.
if you're a broker associate under me, they need to know that you're under my franchise, under an independent contractor agreement, and they don't necessarily, even though you should be advertising as my company,
Okay, so it
DBA, and
says
you are.
notify broker associates, affiliated brokers of TREC, of TREC's disciplinary. So
I think that's statute. I don't think we can.
Well, I think you're asking like, what's the purpose of that notification,
Yeah.
right?
what does it accomplish other than, okay,
well,
he got in trouble?
well, for one.
What does it have to do with me?
Well,
If I'm an associate broker,
Because they're representing you when they go out into the field with your name on their business card.
or, okay, now flip it. Let's say the broker associate is not in trouble, but the brokerage is, but we notify the broker associate.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
I think you can get
What
around
is-
this by
I
simply.
mean, are we
defining a
violating
broker associate.
confidentiality? It's like, well, what does one have to do?
How does,
Earlier.
how
Yeah, that's
could,
what I'm
no,
In written
I was reading, yeah.
because I started thinking when I read this about
yeah, we
one of
do.
our brokers associates have been in trouble. We have had one.
Right. I think that's a great question. What is the purpose of it? What is that notification for?
You're notifying within the brokerage.
It's hard to follow all the conversations.
One at a time, all right. Okay, yeah, that's something we'd have to battle. If the broker gets in trouble, you know, for the brokerage associate.
Well, and also, I mean, I think you've gotta have a reason for wanting that. You gotta have a reason for saying, hey, we need this change, and what is that reason? That reason can't be, oh, well, there might be a civil, I mean, I know this isn't, but like, there might be a civil liability and that person should that brokerage needs to know that they might potentially, you know,
Well.
have a problem, and that's a
if we're trying to
different-
solve a problem we don't have, then what are we doing?
well, that's just a different, I mean,
I guess, I
that's
mean-
still relevant, I'm not saying like, if I had that agreement, I would certainly be like you, and you have to tell me if that happens, but from a regulatory standpoint, I think that's the question.
So our focus is enforcement, right?
Well, and regulation on the front end. I mean, not just
having to do
enforcement,
anything with
licensing.
Civil litigation or what have you.
Yeah, that's
From an
right.
enforcement standpoint,
Oh, yeah.
we're gonna go reach and tap the brokerage, right? And so, and the broker within that brokerage. And now we're saying that if there's an associated broker, now we notify the broker associate too. And then my question is, for what purpose?
I
What does it
agree.
accomplish?
Leslie, yeah, I agree.
But why not just go back to what she mentioned earlier? Put it in written form and everybody knows exactly what it is.
But
Defining a broker
Yeah.
associate.
there's,
You
how do
said-
you define it? Read it to me again, because that puts all the liability on the broker, which is totally, totally against the statute.
A
But
sales
read it.
agent or sponsored sales agent does include a broker affiliated with or working under a broker of record, also known as a broker associate.
But I read it in, because a sales agent is not a broker associate.
Correct. But it says a sales agent or sponsored sales agent does include a broker affiliated with or working under a broker of record, also known as a broker associate. So when you read what is required of a sales agent, if you're associated with somebody, then a
So
broker
you're,
associate, you're still going by the same rule.
but you're eliminating any responsibility a broker associate has and placing it all on the broker. Is what you're doing.
But they're,
Every bit of it. You're putting them as the same level as a sales associate. You're eliminating all liability that they have.
No, with that language, but you can define the language.
Well, read it again.
No,
So
with
here,
what she
I can-
read, but I mean, you can
So, like,
own
one
state-
some of the
Broker is a
language,
broker.
yeah,
So
yeah.
one state does it and says, a broker associate is an individual licensed as a real estate broker, but who works in the capacity of a salesperson for another responsible broker or corporation.
Okay, and that's what New
One
Mexico
state.
is. Everybody's a broker, but
So,
you work for a qualifying broker.
right, and another state says, a real estate broker who does not have an office under the broker's own name, but is affiliated with another licensed broker and performs service similar to that of a salesperson, must not at any time act independently as a broker and shall not perform any real estate service without full consent and knowledge of the broker's supervising broker. The designated broker shall at all times be responsible for the action of the affiliated broker associate to the same extent as though the affiliated broker were an affiliated salesperson.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna do that, and then if I'm a broker associate, you can't make me take broker responsibility, because all my liability belongs to my broker.
You don't take a
And
broker
you're gonna keep it up there.
But-
Yes, they do.
But for the new
Well,
rule,
if we change that one rule, they do.
but for the new rule, it says that before you get a broker's license, you will take broker responsibility.
And you take it each renewal cycle.
Correct.
So why am I taking it if I'm not respond, you're taking all the liability from the broker associate and putting it on the brokerage.
See, to
Don't like
me,
it,
when I read it,
don't like it,
if you
yeah.
have a broker, if you're categorized as a broker or a broker's license, you take broker responsibility.
Well, and if you say, if you're supervising a team, you have to take broker responsibility, whether you're a broker
Right.
or an agent.
But I have a bunch of broker associates that don't supervise anybody, and they don't have to take broker.
But now they don't have to renew the broker's license.
Which, that's a good.
So it'd be, I think the definition component is a method of doing that in statute, I think that's true, I think the decision point, and like, we're talking about this for the first time, we got years, right? I think that the considerations that are being laid out right now are the considerations, right? That's a pretty significant shift in how that's being done. It's creating that regulatory relationship, which is what you would need to do these things. So I think you wanna think about that, and then,
Yeah.
and then you wanna think, okay, how far does that go? Are we, if you just define it the way that Commissioner Lerner's presented it, that's creating like a real big shift, right? Which is fine. That's that's just what that would be doing. That would be a real change in how broker associates have been seen from a regulatory standpoint. If you wanted to get, something specific as it relates to these two in terms of number 4 is the one that I think is easier to speak to, because I think number 3 is real complicated.
Yeah.
But number 4, the collection of their business, their affiliated brokerage business addresses. We have a statute right now that authorizes us to collect very specific contact information, and that makes sense because that is how we reach out to people and notify them, et cetera. There might be room in that statute to have something that's, for a broker who is affiliated with multiple brokerages, they must submit upon I'm making the same stuff as I go, but, upon application and renewal, or however you wanna do it, that address information, and we put that, then we could put that on our website, and I feel like there's an appetite for this one.
I agree.
And the reason I'm, the statutory component of that is because what I just said, that hasn't been seen as a regulatory relationship. It's not information we currently collect. We'd have to write rules on it. Every time we write a rule, we've got to point back to the statute that gives us the authority to do it. And so I think that's where, if we were looking at just carving that one out specifically, I think that's how you would do that. It seems like the bigger conversation is, is there an appetite for a bigger broker associate oversight, essentially? And that's one that can be ongoing.
Do you want that in a work, are you looking for guidance on, do we workshop it? Do we?
I don't know.
What do we do today?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I think that, and that's gonna bleed over into the next item, honestly, is what do we do with these recommendations? On this one, I think, I don't know if this group would like to digest and put it on an agenda for a future workshop. If you want to say now, I love it, let's put it on the list, or maybe just number 3 on the list, or however you want to do that. That you could do that today, or you could kind of push it and think about it.
List being legislative change for.
I'd like a consensus on 2 and 4.
Right.
Yeah.
2 and
Yeah.
4. I
Okay.
just mean,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
I just mean 3 and 4. Right.
I think
Yes.
2 and 4
Yes.
we can do within rules.
Or, yes.
Well, no, I'm sorry.
Everything's.
I think we have a consensus to
Right.
move forward with 2 and 4. I think 3 is gonna take some more digesting, because I think
Yeah.
you're gonna have to find broker associate, yeah.
And
And
on
then I
number
think
4,
that might also rely on if number 2 becomes statute too.
Is it worth taking it back to broker responsibility and saying, hey, give us some
Flesh it
guidance and
out.
then bring it back to us?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly flesh it out
I'm
at
fine
that
with
level.
that. Yeah, but I think 2 and 4, I think everybody's okay
Well,
with.
and the broker associate's probably already on their broker website.
See, but that's, I mean,
So that's,
we're treating it like brokerage have no agreements and supervision over the broker associates, and some of them probably don't.
So that's what I was about to say. You're looking at from your point up here, there's a lot of people that are down here.
But I will make rules for the majority, not the minority, and if we affiliate them on the website with the broker, then I think that gives the consumer the information they need.
It may also necessitate a definition of what that affiliation is.
Yeah.
Who does need to answer those questions.
Yeah.
For the website.
Well, right, so that's right, once that, there's sort of an idea of, yes, we wanna move forward with that, then we've gotta really shape, okay, who provides us that information, what's the timeline, you're doing it within 30 days of changing it, that's that conversation, that's why it's such a big, years-long conversation.
Well, our IBS covers it too.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, you wanna find out who they're at.
That's right. So, okay, I think this bleeds over, I think, we can certainly provide this feedback on the discussion to the broker responsibility working group, and they can keep talking broker associate. Does that seem like a helpful
It's kind of
avenue?
in their purview anyway, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And these are coming from them, right? So we can talk about that some more. And so this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, I believe, is discussion regarding the advisory committee recommendation process. So when you look, you hear those reports from the advisory committees in your commission meeting. A lot of times their recommendations are tied to a rule. And that seems pretty easy because you have a copy of the rule, there's a proposal, I mean, there's a lot that you're engaged in with the rule, but sometimes we have recommendations that aren't rule-based, or that could be rule-based, but, there needs to be some commission feedback as to whether that's like even a direction to go. And then there's ones that are not in rule, they might be in statute, they might be here or there. And what is the best way for those recommendations to be considered by the commission? Because I have this fear that, sometimes things are reported and no one quite knows what to do with them, myself included, because they're reported, but it's not an actionable rule that you can look at. So do you like having it at the workshop level? Yes. And, sort of have and that's not necessarily standing, because if you don't have recommendations, then you don't, but to put that as something that you all workshop and provide feedback to. Is that the route you like? Do you like a different route? Ideas, thoughts?
I like the idea. I mean, and if it's a rule and it gets on the agenda, then the public takes care of it. But I think these we looked at today, I think this is the right place to vet it. Mm-hmm. And I think we tell broker responsibility working group, look, we like 2 and 4, 1 and 3 need work. And I mean, 3, fine us,
Okay, does that seem helpful? I mean, that means for sometimes a longer workshop, but it does seem to me like that's the place where you can get into it and provide the feedback before it's a formal.
Right.
I think we almost have to, before we put a rule out, that way we know where we're coming from, because people are calling us on a rule, and if we don't know where it came from, we don't necessarily know how to present it.
That's right, and if we're not helpful to you in that, and that's something that, I think about those rule presentations, and I wanted to always try and point it out, but like, hey, this is coming from ESAC, and they've had this conversation. A lot of that now is in these recaps that we put out, so you're seeing the recommendations of the groups, we've got those summaries, and we can, provide those. So that's helpful. I want to make sure we've got the right avenue for it, so they don't I would hate for one to fall off, or, that, I would kind of remember that in the report, but whatever happened with that one? And if they don't get a recommendation from the commission or feedback, what do they do with it, right? It just kind of sits there.
Let me add some of that broker associate. There's a company in Midland, and I won't say who, but it's 9 companies that came together. Okay, and they came together as one entity for advertising. I mean, you have 20 listings, you have 20, you have 20, you have 20, and all of a sudden they went from a 5 and 7% market share to a 45% market share. 4 out of 10 signs you saw were theirs, but each one had a broker associate team lead. Well, if we get that, then if one of them messes up, the other 6 broker associates team leaders that were structured correctly are going to be liable for the problem. And that's where I see the liability, you follow me? Mm-hmm. And that was a great marketing idea for a small town, because they certainly overnight had a huge presence. Yeah, and so, anyway, just FYI. Okay, future agenda items, we might already have them.
Yeah. Yes, and I think for the May, isn't this we have this conversation point, in May, there's not a workshop.
And let me add, should probably covered this yesterday, there might be more than one contested case.
Oh, gosh.
No, wait, we learned today, no, update, exciting update to this, in particular for me. It looks like we're only gonna have 2.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
At first, we thought we might have as many as double digits.
Agreements, settlements.
Someone settled,
Yeah.
couple got reset.
Okay, so I was gonna tell y'all, bring your material early, because there might be double digits, but that's good. Only 2 of them? We'll do that in our sleep.
Yeah.
All right, y'all,
Have you decided where?
I'm gonna give Chelsea, Vanessa, and staff of these initiatives, everyone we went over, y'all, we've moved it forward a bunch. and they get these initiatives from us. So
Yeah, and-
kudos to you and staff.
Well, as staff, I think each one of these initiatives was a significant lift. And I think we learned a lot about kind of how best to move things forward and what you want. I'm really just proud of staff and in particular Vanessa and Abby for leading the charge on that.
Their computers have been going like crazy back here.
Sorry you missed you, Jennifer. All right, motion to adjourn? Thank you for your time.
Greenwood Plaza.
Now I'm
I
gonna
mean,
take.
I know where Greenwood Plaza is, I don't know.
I was just picturing, there's like, isn't there like our?
Right, young man.